This is the third session of our National Heritage Board and Genealogy Society Singapore's joint programs on ancestry and intangible heritage. The previous two sessions, we touched on the Bugis, the Peranakan, and the Indian communities. Today, we focus on the Chinese community as a prelude and early celebration of the Chinese New Year. We're going to hear from three speakers from different dialect groups, different age group, and different background. The first speaker is Mr. Spin Lim. Spin is a Teochew Catholic and English educator, having written a book on my maternal roots. His book is no doubt a valuable collection or addition to the Singapore's heritage. He will share with us from the perspective of Teochew and Catholic faith through the lens of his family tree. Over to you, Cyprian.
And being connected with family is essential for this purpose. In our busy city living, CNY is a blessing and an opportunity. Now, there is a hidden story in my book about a paranormal event. It's about a great-grand aunt, Maria, and her encounter with her late brother from the other world. Okay? Her aspiration was to be a nun, but there was no convent to go then, in China. So when the war came in Singapore, right, she fled to Siam, where her brother appeared one night to her with a strong burning smell. Now, he said he needed to settle something, okay, and left behind a burnt handprint on the wooden table. Now, these graphic details are in my book. Now, the account reflects her very Catholic upbringing, particularly about a Catholic doctrine called purgatory, where a soul goes to a place of purification before entering heaven. Now, this story turned out to be a sequel to an account given just a few years back by another grand aunt who lived in the Mandai village. Her father was a victim of the Sukching massacre execution by the Japanese in 1942, and his name was Li Keng Pao. So, strange as it may sound, the story from Maria was an important door to a deep intrigue and curiosity about my roots. Right? I need to qualify that the Catholic faith is not about supernatural events. Okay? But God, I believe, does allow such occurrences to happen occasionally, perhaps to reveal something. And also, to my surprise, some similar incidents have been documented, in a church in Rome. So, as I pursued my research, one find led to another, progressing from my mother's bedtime stories to interviewing my friends, even the late Archbishop Yong and a Catholic nun who knew about my great-grandfather because he was very involved in the church. I learned that he was a grocery merchant, a rich tauke, because and he owned farms and so on. And because of that, he had the financial means to help fund projects for church buildings, right? Maybe a founding of Catholic schools. Now you see, these stories of the past are stored, in the collective memory of family and friends, and you have to draw them out. So what better time to do this than during the Chinese New Year? So, the Catholic Church always have masses for those who wish to begin the festive day with prayer. So mass is an organized prayer in church, a worship. Okay, so oranges are blessed and distributed, ang paos are exchanged, goodies sold, and so on and so forth. And then the gatherings. So the place where I used to showcase my collection of stories, to my family, to my friends. But I was introduced to this man who was a close friend of my grandfather one day. One day I was introduced to him, and it was from him that I finally learned what I had been searching for all my life. The name and place of my ancestral village in China. If only I could put my finger on the map of China, but no one could tell me except for Mr. Yao. So he said, your ancestral village is in Bailing-chun or Bailen-chun, in Guangdong province. Wow, that was so exciting. I couldn't sleep at night. So, and guess what? In no time, I found myself on a plane and landing in China for the first time, to the land of my ancestors, to a past that seemed to be just stories and fables, right? Of a distant land. Now, throughout my trip there, I was like a dry sponge, soaking up everything, hungry to see everything, to hear everything, to touch everything. The interiors of houses, the food, and so on and so forth, right? And now I see what they mean when they said that great-great-grandfather Joseph had come from a Catholic village. His ancestors were non-Catholic and came from a Taoist village called Jimsu in Chaoyang, where they had been there for the previous 500 years. Now, his conversion to the Catholic faith marked the turning point in the history of the family. He migrated, therefore, to the Catholic village, where the Latin Mass was still celebrated at the end of the Manchu era. So from his tombstone, we found also more information that he was a state scholar. Yeah. So on the left column, you can see that it's the 17th year of the reign of Emperor Gongsu, right, of the Qing dynasty. So because he was educated, he was successful, right, in things that he did. But the rumor was that he was murdered because of some jealousy. Yeah. Okay. So all these discoveries, so excited was I that I published in 3 years a fat book with all my findings, and surprised even myself. Yeah. If you haven't seen this video, I hope it captures my imagination, my excitement, and the flavor of my story.
Meaning and surprise, especially if no contact had been made for 100 years. A call to the Cathedral of the Catholic Diocese of Shantou in January 2017 opened a window for us to rekindle the bond. We asked Father Li Zhuo-Sing if he had heard of the names of my ancestors. He said yes. With the help of a friend Emmanuel, we left for the village of Pekne on 8th of March 2017. Accompanying us were my wife Marjorie and 3 of my children. If you don't come back, we'd never know you, remarked a relative in the Hui Lai accent of the Teochew dialect. Indeed, for our relatives there, we had not paid them a visit. Rather, we had come home. In the village, we are distant relatives, yet we were treated no differently. For them, a cousin is a cousin, whether one shares the same grandfather or are related via a great-great-great-grand-ancestor. During our visit, I was handed the book of the family genealogy entitled The Book of the Big Li Clan. In the family book was recorded my lineage, going back 20 generations, with names and fascinating details. It was indeed a privilege to possess it, for the genealogy had been spared the flames of Mao's Great Purge. In the ancient book is laid out the philosophy of the clan. A quote from the last chapter sums it up perfectly. Though we are separated overseas and rooted in other countries, we must preserve the roots that link us back thousands of years. With this new information from China, the opening chapter of this book now covers the origins of the Big Li clan since the period of the Shang dynasty. It outlines almost 700 years of my bloodline and documents events in the family since the mid-19th century. The book details the fleeing of thousands of Chinese refugees to Singapore because of the political unrest in southern China. Among the escapees were a number of Catholics from Swatao. Great-grandfather Paul Lee Keng Guan and some of the family were fortunate to have left for Southeast Asia for business before the onset of the Chinese Civil War. The refugees were welcomed by the Bishop of Singapore and eventually housed in the Mandai area, where Paul and a few others assisted Father Stephen Lee to care for their material and spiritual needs. Paul held responsible positions both in church and Teochew clan associations. He was a major advocate for the educational welfare of the Chinese Catholics and played a key role in the lead-up to the establishment of the Catholic High School. His legacy continues to this day in a son and 2 grandsons who have served the Catholic population of Malaysia and Singapore as Catholic priests.
Mr. Ho is the president of the Singapore Pawnbrokers Association. He has been very actively involved in the civic sector, including chairman of the Chayang Tapu Association, the Feng Yong Tai, actually Feng Yong Da, but the English version is Feng Yong Tai, but I would probably say Chinese, Feng Yong Da Association. And then currently, he retained as the vice president of the Feng Yong Da Association, and he's currently the chairman of the Nanyang Cake Community Guide. It's an umbrella body for quite a few Hakka clan associations. So Ivan will share with us from the perspective of the Hakka lineage and share with us a little bit of his family ancestry and also how perhaps Chinese New Year's celebration is done. Over to you, Ivan.
Okay. As far as I can remember, I started to better understanding of the relationship between the kin and relatives around the time I was in secondary school, as my command over the Chinese language strengthened at the time. My late father migrated to Singapore from China at a very young age. However, he paid much attention to maintaining the ties of the kingship and passing down knowledge over how one family member related to the other, as well as our ancestral beginnings. He diligently educated my brothers and myself as to the appropriate titles to use when addressing relatives, and make us remember the names of our great grandparents, and uncles and aunts, and even cousins. So just these 4 generations alone comprise a large group of to remember. Now in 1965, my father formed the Chayong Dapu Whole Clan Association. Now, along with a few others who had likewise migrated to Singapore from Dapu region in Guangdong, China. Through him, I came to understand that there were 4 main groups. That means Yuan, Hen, Li, Zhen, Si Fang in Dapu, who all descended from a common ancestor. Subsequently, after joining the whole clan association myself, I gained a better understanding of network and the structure of the wider whole clan. In my 40s, I returned with my parents to visit our relative in our ancestral village in Dapu. Through offering our respect to our ancestor and in various conversations with the village elders and relatives, I gradually pieced together the history of my people. Now, early in the Song dynasty, to escape unrest and strife, our early ancestor, He Dalang, that's means the first generation, led his family to relocate in this Ninghua Sepi in Fujian province. That was 921 years AD. Subsequently, he led his family to move to this Wuping, also Fujian, and settle down before finally settle down and establishing himself. Around AD 1,300 years, close to the end of the Song dynasty, the 8th and 9th and the subsequent generations descendants of He Dalang progressively moved from Fujian westwards to settle down in Dapu, which is in this Guangdong province, next to Chaozhou. And then tracing back, this whole family in Dapu has had a history of nearly 700 years. Now, the Yuan Fang, the lineage that I belong to, originated from the 8th generation ancestor, Nian Ba Gong, who settled down and established himself in the Jichun, we call it Jichun. Then thereafter, around the 16th generations, a sub-strand of his descendant moved from this Jichun to Shentangchun, where my ancestors have lived and called home since. My generation is now the 25th generation of the original lineage. Now, there was altogether 5 key additions to the Yuan Fang He Si lineage genealogy book major update actually was made during the 5 periods. The first is the Ming Dynasty in 1621, and then the second edition came in this Qingtao during Kangxi 1688 years. Then the third edition was in Qingtao again, but is during the Yongzheng period, 1729. Then the fourth, also Qingtao, is during the Qianlong, 1774. Then the last edition was during the Republic of China, 民国时期, 1920. So the gap between the fourth and the fifth edition was 140 years long. So the long gap inevitably resulted in many gaps and missing links in the genealogy book. In addition, towards the end of the Qing Dynasty, there was a widespread of this immigration of Chinese to the Southeast Asia, so which exacerbate the information gap in our records. Now, since the fifth and the latest edition, 90 years has passed. So this is roughly equivalent to 3 generations whose record have not been updated in the genealogy book. This is a serious gap. So therefore, in 2009, the Singapore Chaiyang whole clan, together with the Dabu whole clan, the Dabu 和氏中心联谊会, we jointly initiated an effort to revise and update the whole clan Jichun 和氏 ancestral record. We raised funds in 2 different regions and commissioned the survey effort to trace back the genealogy to Nian Ba Gong, that means the 8 generations. The effort started from our own hometown Dabu and subsequently involved the clan association in Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, and other foreign places. Hand in hand, the various clan associations conducted research, verifications, studies, and collated the feedback and findings. Now, this effort to revise and update the genealogy book has received warm and enthusiastic response from all those involved. Between early 2009 and the end of 2011, the sharing of the data and the information from all quarters were enthusiastic and incessant. So those who provide the information, they did so using personal record that they had privately upkept or their own memories or through consultation with their relatives. Some even went as far as to the cemeteries and colubrium to verify the identity of the past relative and their links to the present generations. Yet others donated their own private family genealogy book for collation. The energy and enthusiasm behind everyone's participation strengthened the editorial team's determination and confidence that we would one day piece together a more complete picture of the clan collective's history and story. Now, the deluge of information we received through the exercise helped fill many gaps that existed. We now have records updated to the most recent generations, which has been missing. Now, with the advance of the digital technology, there is now less human error in our records, and we can maintain and upkeep a far larger amount of the information in a more efficient and productive manner. This has enabled us to approach the updating of our genealogy book in a more systematic fashion. In March 2012, the Tapu Ho Clan Association finally published most recent edition of the Ji Chun Ho Clan genealogy book, tracing from Nian Pa Gong, the 8th generation, thereby fulfilling the initial promise. Although it is not 100% complete, it is objectively speaking fairly comprehensive. Now, the genealogy book comprises 2 volumes with a total of 887 pages and weighing at 2 kilograms. The most recent edition is regarded as a standard tome of the reference for clansmen today. This is my experience editing and update my family trees and the clan's genealogy book. It was a costly and time-consuming effort, a major undertaking. So our hope is that the present and the future generation will provide timely updates whenever new descendants are born into the family. This will help us to avoid unnecessary gaps and omission going forward. All right, this is my personal experience in dealing with the update of our genealogy book. Now, or maybe I touch on the delicacy of the Hakka.
All right.
Now,
good.
Yeah, every region's or ethnic group has its own unique cuisine, which not only showcase the local procure, but also tell us the story of its peoples, their histories and traditions. Hakka cuisine itself is diverse and different from region to region. Among the most well-known and loved delicacy of ours, the Tapu Hakka, include this apocalypse as me 蒜盘子, yong tofu, niang tofu, salt baked chicken, 盐焗鸡, braised pork belly with preserved vegetable, 梅菜扣肉, 笋板 is a form of kueh with consists of bamboo shoot and others. Now, and also a very favorite dishes is yam mian, very
Yum, yeah.
yeah, yam mian. Is basically it's just noodles. All right, many Hakka family have managed to bring these home style dishes with them when they migrated to this Southeast Asia. We have managed to preserve the authenticity of the Tapu Hakka cuisine through many generations and are still able to enjoy the familiar flavor of our heritage. Just like the Hakka dialect preserving the language of our ancestors, Hakka cuisine has also retained the traditions and custom of our ancestors, which can be traced back to ancient time. Being a reflection of the locally available ingredients, Hakka cuisine typically features domestic livestock, farm and wild vegetables. Seafood is less common. The most commonly used cooking methods are braising, roasting, stuffing, and stewing. Now, the characteristic taste profile of the cuisine are fatty, 肥, savory, 咸, and fragrant. So food is typically served family style, a large sharing portion. A classic example would be the Hakka 大盆菜. All right. So I'm lucky that my wife is the only one among my extended family who is capable to prepare these traditional comfort foods, which are always a crowd favorite amongst relatives and the younger generations alike, especially during the Lunar Chinese New Year, where these traditional Hakka dishes take center stage. Every bite invokes a warm feeling and a home and nostalgia. Now, ultimately, traditional Hakka cuisine is not just about the food. It connects us to the profound history of our ancestral roots and offering us a glimpse of our custom, value, and culture, and the way of life of the warm and hardworking Hakka.
Okay, the third speaker is Mr. Jerome Teo. He's our GSS Assistant Honorary English Secretary and has been actively involved in various societies as well, a member of the Singapore Heritage Society and various other organizations in the field of traditional culture, heritage, museum, and clans. So he will be sharing with us from the perspective of his family history and the Seng Hong Temple and some of the festivities, especially Chinese New Year. Over to you, Jerome.
Okay, so the title of my talk today is the Ang Kuei People of Singapore, Stories from Kampong Java, Teban. So as you can see from this photo here, right, this is a portrait of my maternal family, right? My grandfather is Mr. Chua Tor Cheng. 10 years ago, I donated a set of about 100 photos to the National Archive of Singapore. It's called the Mr. and Mrs. Chua Tor Cheng collections. It's about Singapore in the West Coast, Pasir Panjang area and the Katong area from the 1950s to the 60s. So it's available on the National Archive. You can browse it. So my grandfather, his ancestral, maternal grandfather, his ancestral origin is from Fujian, Quanzhou Prefecture, Anxi County, and Luting Village. So Anxi is also called Ang Kuei in our dialect. So some years ago, when before he passed away, in 2006, right, I asked about his origins, and he said that he came not from China directly, but his family came from a place called Aogang Fourth Milestone, Pineapple Hill, which is today known as the Mount Vernon, Fei Long San. Okay, previously it was not known by the Hokkien as Online Swan, in Aogang Fourth Milestone. So what happened is that in 1926 there was a migration of this part of the village to West Coast Road at 10 Milestone, and which is known as Star Fruit Plantation, Ng Do Heng, Yang Tao Yuan, or officially known as Kampong Java, Teban. Today, this place is known as Teban Gardens Hawker and Markets, Hawker Center and Market, which is near the slightly north of Pandan Reservoir. Right. So what really happened? So I was really curious what happened that make that people from 1926 came to this West Coast road. So the village in the West Coast road there has already vanished. So the only thing that my parent told me is that our village in West Coast is connected to this temple known as Yang Tao Yuan Seng Hong Temple, or the City God Temple, which was founded the same time as the founding of the village in 1926. So this temple, you can see the photo here. My mother brought me there, when I was young, every year for a visit to do our prayer and our religious matter, So I was surprised that this temple kept a record of our village history as well. So I took some of their books, and they gave it to me. Some of their books published, on their 90th, I think on the 80th, on their 90th and their 100th anniversary. They detailed the origin of this village. So what happened is that in 1917, right, a priest and a scholar carried by sea the statue of Shen Hong, city god from China, on An Kuei. An Kuei is a county in Fujian to Singapore, to this place in Singapore called Creek Road. I don't know how to pronounce it. C-R-A-I-G, Creek Road, which is near New Road, Keong Siak Road, and Dexton Plain area. So to raise funds for the China's temples maintenance and restoration. But because the devotees in Singapore, they were from the same village, and they were so touched that the god, the statue of the deity came for a visit. They kneeled down, on the last night of the statue tour of Singapore, and knelt down and requested and plead to the god, to stay in Singapore, make your statue stay in Singapore and stay with the villagers, because we are of the same village. And God, Sheng Hong agreed to it, and fortunately escaped the Cultural Revolution in Singapore, in China. So I will talk more about that later. So, so what happened is from 1917 Creek Road, they have a temporary location, and they moved to Pineapple Hill to live with the An Kui people, in their village there. They have an An Kui village in Pineapple Hill. Pineapple Hill, part of the village, was in 1938 was acquired by the owner for rubber tree recultivation work, and so they they moved to Lorong Kuchai, slightly nearby, to build their new village and new temple in 1938. And in 1970s, Lorong Kuchai have to be evicted, and it was rebuilt at today's Arumugam Road in 1970s, which is now near the MacPherson MRT. So our village, right, our lineage, right, this star fruit plantation, right, actually descended from an offshoot of this Pineapple Hill, before they moved to Lorong Kuchai, in 1936. So, and then in 1970s, the same fate happened to our village in West Coast Road, and we have to be evicted and then rebuilt to a nearby plot of land, which I say is the the Teban Gardens area. So next slide, it shows in some photo in 2007 when we celebrated the temple's 90th anniversary, and the original statue was brought back to China, the same village, for a spring procession. Procession means a tour of the village, and the main temple in China was founded in 956 AD. So that was about 1,000 years ago, in the late period of the Tang Dynasty. So as early as that period, there was this annual spring procession. We call it in Chinese Chun Xun. It continued into the Qing Dynasty. So it lasted for thousands of years, And in 1991, the Singapore Temple community proposed to their counterpart in Singapore to revive this annual procession, because there was a gap of 40 years, it was stopped in 1952. So they proposed, and it was approved by the Conti government. So, in 1992, the spring procession was revived after a 40 years gap, and it became an annual event jointly organized and participated by the local and overseas An Kui people. So the past 2 years, unfortunately, we were not able to do that because of the pandemic. But it was like it's not just a temple event, but it was it is a celebration of kinship and villageship, to celebrate our origins, and our culture. So what happened during the Spring Festival? What happened during Chinese New Year? Other than the spring procession, we have also this custom of praying to Tai Sui, right, in Singapore. And it is claimed that the Sheng Hong Temple started this culture of worshipping Tai Sui, as the first Taoist temple to do it, right? And they first invited these Tai Sui deities from Beijing in 1993. So they claim to be the first one to start this praying to Tai Sui. culture, and it's now a popular Chinese New Year tradition in many Taoist temples in Singapore. Right. To those that do not know what is Tai Sui about, I have a poster here. It's trying to say that Tai Sui is a set of 60 deities. Each deity represents one year of the Chinese hexagonal calendar. Right. The Chinese calendar works by 12 times 5 equals 60. A set of 60 years makes one set of hexagonal years. So I know for this year 2020, you can see people born in the year of the tiger, pig, and snake and monkey. You need to pray to the Tai Sui, right? So next slide. What happens after Chinese New Year, right? The very key important festivals in the Angkui community is the city god's birthday. The Shen Hong birthday falls on the 5th lunar month and the 28th day, right? So we will offer them roasted pork, and we have wayang, Hokkien wayang, and also Teochew wayang is also accepted. So what happened is that because both of the temple in Lorong Kuchai and in the West Coast village, right, the Yang Taoyuan village, they were able to escape the Japanese occupation. It was said there was 0 casualties, and it's believed that the Shen Hong temple did a lot of effort to help us escape the Japanese attack. And that's why after the Japanese occupation, the people were so grateful to the city god for helping up to protect their lives. So since then, the family will offer roast pork and other offerings, as well as Hokkien wayang shows, Teochew show for the deities on his birthdays. And of course, a lot of original village has moved out, so the temples has become quite quiet in recent years. But those parents, grandparents that bring back their descendants like me to acknowledge our tie with this temple, we will know what is this about, right? It's a very private, small community, and our event is not really a public event that is open out. It's not open up to all Hokkien community, right? It's very, very private to our own, it's our own private community like that, because it's a celebration of a villageship, you see. So this slide shows this book called The General History of the Chinese in Singapore. Is edited by Kwa Chung Guan and Kwa Bat Lim, published by the World Scientific and the Federation of Chinese Clan and Association. So in chapter 11b, the title is Chinese Temple and the Transnational Network Hokkien Community in Singapore. I think that this book is a very good book that clearly illustrated, the Hokkien and the Taoist culture in Singapore. And what I say is just the tip of the iceberg. So I just read up some of the paragraph that I find interesting to say, right? It argues that all the religious networks of the main gods and the Taoist altar play a significant role in the transnation movement of resources between Singapore and China. These resources include people of varying socio-economic background, various forms of ritual knowledge and innovations, money and material. In addition, many religious bodies have revived ties to China in recent years through the provision of assistance in reconstructions of temples and halls, as well as surrounding infrastructure, something that is sorely needed after the destruction of religious items and facilities during the Cultural Revolution. Right. So this book clearly re-emphasized what I've said earlier. The deity statue was able to fortunately escape the destruction during the Cultural Revolution in China. So the temple, it was said that this god is very smart and it can foresee the future, and therefore, escape the fate of the cultural havoc, in the 1950s in China. All the things there, the temples and other things were destroyed, but the deities escaped, and and the China in Singapore, our Hokkien and our Taoist community play a very important role in reviving the tradition in China, as well as, support the social economic regrowth of the area, you see. So next slide, I have talked about the people, I have talked about the temple, right? How this temple is linked to our community. Now, who are these people called the Ansi people? Who are these An Kwe people, right? There was a mass migration of these An Kwe people to Singapore, in the late 18th century to the 1940s because of famine, poverty, civil unrest, and in Fujian it's called 霸山一水一分田, the 80% is mountain, 10% is water, and 10% is arable land, right? And this is not, and the An Kwe County of this Quanzhou prefecture is not an exception. It is mountainous, it is landlocked, and it experience economic difficulties. So no choice, the people have to mass migrate at that time to Singapore. And this place, the only thing that they can cultivate is tea. So there is a saying, the Hokkien grows tea and the Teochew drinks tea, right? And in my family, we celebrate our An Kwe Chinese New Year Eve, because although I am Teochew on my father's side, but my mother practiced this culture and custom in my family. It has been passed down for many generations already, and my father accepts it, right? What happened is that, on the eve, of Chinese New Year, we will open the gateway, our gate and our door. It will face north, and we'll erect an altar. We will call this custom in An Kwe as Ho Jia. In Mandarin, it means He Zhen. This word, right, means in English means ushering the new year. The altar does not pray to any specific deities. We are just praying to heaven in general. We are just, respecting heaven and ushering the new year. So on this altar, we have the Wu Gong, which is the incense, the candles, and the flower. We have teas and the Zhap Li Cai Wa or Zai Wa, which is called the vegetarian bowls. The vegetarian Zai Wa is steep in meanings. It's only offered to deities or to signify our highest honor to the deities, and it's not meant for ancestor. It's not meant for the hungry ghosts. And recently I was shocked that someone put the Zhap Li Cai Wa for the Hungry Ghost Festival. I think they cannot sell, because nowadays we have the pre-packed Zhap Li Cai Wa. They have spec, packet which they cannot sell out. So I think they recycled it for the hungry ghosts, and it's not really right to do that. It's only used to express our highest honor to the deities. And we also have the Fa Gao and the Nian Gao and all those fruits that are necessary. But what I'm told that is not used. This Ho Jia is not a period to worship deities, but just to usher in the new year. So I'm still researching the meaning and significance of this Ho Jia. I'm trying to go back to China and ask the village the significance of this custom. So I can't go back because of the pandemic. I have plans to go and interview them if things works out. So dishes that buy, right? We have this braised ducks here. Braised duck is something that every family must know how to make if you are praying to your ancestor on the Chinese New Year Eve. It's not just the Hokkien, but also for the Teochew as well. You need braised duck, and it's one part of the 3 set of meat called the something meat, right? It has steeped in Confucius meanings. And also we have the braised sea cucumber with mushroom. Is a dish passed down since my great-grandmother. Last time my great-grandmother used to use the braised duck stalks as the gravy as a stock, but my grandmother and my mother, we changed it to braised pork the gravy as the stock. And then lastly, we have the Mi Hun Gui. It's not a Chinese New Year dish, but I just want to share that it's a very typical An Kui dish. I don't know, is it all the Hokkien people, they will eat it, but in all the An Kui people that I know of, they will always say this is our dish. You say An Kui, then you must say Mi Hun Gui. You say Mi Hun Gui, then you must say the An Kui people, right? It's just actually a dough. Use wheat flour to press it into dough, and then you just pinch the dough and cook it in anchovy and yellow bean stock, and it will taste very delicious. It's illustrated in the photo, and you must always use a vegetable called hui cai, right? And other vegetables will not work. Only these special vegetables will work with Mi Hun Gui, right? So conclusion is my conclusion side is 国有历史，家有家谱, right? A country has history, a family has genealogy. So what I want to share here is that we are a collective society, and family genealogy is not just a story of one family, right? Knowing our family history is also about how we are connected to our other families through locality history, custom and culture of our village, town, or county, right? And religious institution, play an important role as an archive of locality history and social memories. So here I wish everyone Sing and Kuai Le happy Chinese New Year. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for the three speakers for sharing from very different perspectives, but all have a key message, the diversity in our ancestries and the sharing of family history.